The sun beat down on the concrete of Fort Dalton's parade ground, glinting off polished metals and mirrored aviator sunglasses. The air smelled of starch sweat and the kind of anticipation that only comes with ceremony. Flags rippled gently, a band played something proud but muted, and the rows of service members stood tall backs, straight shoes gleaming. Claire Bennett stood at the front, her uniform crisp, her chest rising with quiet disbelief as the commanding officer clipped the Distinguished Service Medal onto her jacket. Her heart pounded not with pride, but with something closer to resistance. She had worn this uniform in silence, in pain, in dust and blood. Now it was being pinned like a trophy in front of an audience that barely knew the war she'd fought inside her own home. The colonel leaned in with a smile meant for the press cameras and said, "You've made your country proud, Lieutenant Bennett." Claire managed a nod. She looked to the crowd scanning faces. Her mother was there, hands clasped in her lap. Her father Gregory sat stone-faced, arms crossed, and beside him Cassandra, her sister, the golden one, always the first in everything. Except this. Claire could see the tension building in Cassandra's jaw before it happened. The slight lean forward, the hand gripping the edge of her seat. And then it exploded. "I wish you'd died in combat." The words were not whispered. They tore through the air louder than the rifle salute that would follow. The band stopped playing. The flags seemed to pause. The entire parade ground froze. For one impossible moment, silence overtook everything. Claire didn't flinch. Not at first. Her eyes locked with Cassandra's, saw the red blaze of hatred behind them, the curled lip, the poison that had always been there. She heard murmurs rise like distant thunder, officers shifting, cameras panning. Her knees gave out not from weakness, not from shame, but from the sudden pressure of everything unsaid collapsing in on itself. The moment did not feel like humiliation. It felt like a release. Her hand went to the metal fingers hovering over the silver. She knelt on one knee. A few thought she was fainting. Others assumed she was overwhelmed with pride or emotion. But Claire knew the truth. She wasn't kneeling for the medal. She was kneeling for everything that had been taken before it. For every night her father's anger burned through walls. For every bruise her mother powdered over. For every sentence Cassandra spat with that ice-coated smile. This wasn't defeat. It was ignition. As her head bowed, she heard someone whisper in the crowd. Was that her sister? Another voice followed, sharp, disgusted. What kind of person says that at a military ceremony? She lifted her chin just slightly. She didn't cry. She didn't answer. Because Claire Bennett knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the first moment everyone else finally saw the fire she had been walking through for years. Behind her, the colonel turned confused. Behind the colonel, the media crew scrambled. A photographer captured the image, Claire on one knee, eyes wide, her sister's mouth still twisted in mid-scream. That photo would circle news feeds and blogs, but no caption would ever explain the real reason Claire had fallen to her knees. Because the battlefield that scarred her wasn't only in another country. It lived in her childhood home. And now, under the bright sun of public recognition, the truth had cracked wide open. The image of Claire on one knee in front of the whole base faded into the back of her mind as a different memory took its place, sharp as glass. She was 9 years old, sitting at the edge of the staircase, knees pulled to her chest, watching her sister Cassandra get praised for winning yet another spelling bee. Their father, Gregory Bennett, held the golden trophy up like it was the Olympic flame, grinning with pride. He tousled Cassandra's hair and said, "That's my girl. Smart, sharp, just like her old man." Claire had clapped quietly, unsure if she should stand or stay seated. She had come in second place. Her certificate was folded in half in her backpack. No one asked about it. After the pizza was eaten and the cheap supermarket cake sliced, Claire helped clear the plates while Cassandra basked in the glory of another triumph. "You'll always be second best, Claire," Cassandra had whispered that night as they brushed their teeth side by side. "You know that, right?" Claire said nothing. The next morning, their father slammed his fist into the kitchen table because someone had left the milk out. It had gone sour. His face turned red with fury, and Claire could already feel the storm coming. "Who left this out?" he bellowed. Cassandra blinked innocently. Claire froze. Their mother Linda stepped in, her voice shaky. "I used it last. It was probably me." Claire knew that wasn't true. But her mother took the blame anyway, like always. Gregory backhanded her so fast, Claire didn't even register the motion, just the sound. A sickening crack followed by the sharp inhale of someone trying not to cry. Claire's stomach turned. "Don't you ever waste money like that again," Gregory spat as Linda cradled her cheek, nodding, already reaching for a rag. Cassandra looked at Claire, then whispered, "She's so dramatic." Claire's heart ached with confusion. She didn't understand why everyone tiptoed around Gregory like he was made of dynamite, or why Cassandra always got away with everything. When she broke a vase, she blamed Claire. When Claire stood up for herself, she got grounded for disrespect. Their home felt like a rigged game where rules changed based on who held the louder voice. As they grew older, it only got worse. Gregory expected Claire to toughen up, calling her soft if she cried, lazy if she sat still. He threw her basketball medal in the trash because it wasn't first place. He told her, "You think life gives a damn about second. Try again when you matter." Once Claire asked to take violin lessons. Her father laughed. "What for? You want to be some orchestra reject. Do something useful." Meanwhile, Cassandra got ballet shoes, piano lessons, tutoring, and new clothes for every recital. Their mother stayed quiet through it all. Claire didn't know if it was fear or defeat. She remembered sitting in the back seat of the car during one silent ride home after church. Cassandra had spilled grape juice on the back of her dress. Claire reached over to help blot it, and Cassandra smacked her hand away, yelling, "Don't touch me, freak!" Gregory glanced in the rearview mirror. Claire braced herself, but he said nothing to Cassandra. Instead, he muttered, "Quit bothering your sister." Claire's throat tightened. She knew then that fairness was a myth in her family. Years later, she asked her mother, "Why doesn't he ever yell at Cassandra?" Her mother said, "Because he sees himself in her." Claire blinked. "Then what does he see in me?" Her mother didn't answer. One afternoon, Claire forgot to put her shoes away. Gregory tripped over them and dragged her by the arm into the garage. "You think you can just disrespect this house?" he roared. Claire tried to explain, to apologize, but the grip on her wrist tightened. Cassandra watched from the hallway and turned away without a word. Claire never forgot the sound of the wrench falling off the workbench when Gregory shoved her against it. She never forgot the bruise that bloomed on her ribs, or how her mother dabbed it with ointment and said, "Just keep your head down next time." That was the rule. Stay small. Be quiet. Let Cassandra shine. Let Gregory explode and fizzle. Survival depended on stillness. Claire started spending more time at school, joining after-school clubs, asking to stay late under the guise of extra study. It wasn't because she loved school. It was because she couldn't breathe at home. When people at school asked why she was always so serious, so quiet, Claire just smiled and said, "That's just how I am." But inside, she carried a map of bruises that no one could see, and a growing question in her chest. Was she doomed to be a shadow forever? Claire used to wonder how her mother survived it all without breaking. Linda Bennett moved through the house like a ghost with purpose, always folding, wiping, smoothing, soothing. Her presence was quiet, her voice softer than the hum of the refrigerator. But there were signs, subtle ones. Her sleeves were always long, even in July. Her hands trembled when she set plates down. Her smile never reached her eyes. Claire once caught a glimpse of a deep purple bruise along her mother's collarbone as she leaned over the sink. Their eyes met in the reflection of the window, and Linda quietly adjusted her neckline without a word. No explanation, no drama, just silence. Gregory's rage rarely spared anyone, but with Linda it took a different shape. It wasn't always bruises. Sometimes it was the way he spoke to her, slicing through her confidence with a glance, dismissing her thoughts with a single grunt. She would suggest a new recipe and he'd sneer, "What's the point? You'll just ruin it." She would ask about buying something for the house and he'd scoff. "Don't act like you contribute." Claire saw it all. And worse, Cassandra mimicked it. "You're so slow, Mom. You forgot the salt again. Do you even taste the food you make?" Linda never fought back, never yelled, just smiled, tucked her head, and kept stirring the pot. Claire once asked her in a whisper, "Why don't you leave him?" They were sitting in the laundry room. Claire was 14. She had just helped her mother cover a red mark on her cheek with concealer. Linda didn't answer immediately. She folded a towel slowly corner to corner. Then she said, "Because broken bones heal faster than broken homes." Claire didn't know what to say to that. It haunted her. Was that really true? Did her mother believe the damage she carried was worth the illusion of a family? The answer came in small ways. In how Linda made Claire's favorite soup every time she had a test, even when there wasn't money for fresh ingredients. In how she sewed the same pair of socks 3 times instead of buying new ones. In how she cried silently behind the bathroom door, face pressed into a towel, always locking it so no one would see. One night after Gregory had smashed a plate during dinner because the steak was overcooked, Linda cleaned it up with her bare hands. Claire kneeled beside her and said, "He shouldn't talk to you like that." Her mother gave her a weak smile. "He's just tired, Claire. It's been a hard week at work." That wasn't an answer, but it was the only one Claire would get. After that, Claire began to watch her mother more closely. How she flinched at sudden noises. How she waited a beat before answering Gregory's questions, calculating his mood. How she apologized for things she didn't do. Once during a thunderstorm, the power flickered off. Claire was 12. Gregory snapped that someone must have blown a fuse even though it was clearly the weather. Linda immediately got up and said she'd check the basement. Claire followed her. In the dark, she saw her mother's fingers shake as she reached for the flashlight. She whispered, "Stay upstairs, honey." But Claire didn't. She stood at the top of the stairs, listening to the quiet shuffle below, the way her mother breathed through her fear. Claire never forgot it. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Her mother never screamed, never cracked. She bent again and again, but never shattered. It made Claire angry. Not at her mother, but at the world that made her mother believe enduring pain was the same as being strong. One day in high school, Claire got into a fight with Cassandra. Nothing physical, just words, sharp and fast. Cassandra had told a lie to one of Claire's teachers, causing her to lose an academic opportunity. Claire confronted her. Cassandra laughed and said, "You're just jealous. You'll never be more than background noise." Linda walked in on them shouting and told Claire to go to her room. Later, she brought Claire a mug of tea. Claire asked, "Why do you always defend her?" Linda looked tired. She stared at the floor for a long time before replying, "Because if I don't, she'll become just like him." Claire wanted to say it was too late, but she didn't. She just sipped the tea and swallowed her anger. That night, Claire watched her mother fix the crooked curtain rod in the living room. Gregory had broken it in a rage, but Linda never asked for help. She dragged a chair across the carpet, stood on it barefoot, and hammered the bracket back in place. Claire sat silently holding the box of nails. When Linda climbed down, she exhaled and said, "Thank you, baby." Claire didn't answer, but inside, something shifted. She didn't want to become her mother, but she also realized her mother wasn't weak. She was surviving in a war zone with nothing but grace and grit. And Claire knew then surviving without violence was strength too. She just didn't know how much of it she'd need. Not yet. The idea came to Claire during a lunch period when she was 16, sitting alone under a flickering light in the school library. She'd been reading an article about female officers in the Army, and one photo stopped her cold. A woman in a navy blue uniform stood tall beside a flagpole, hands behind her back, chin lifted, eyes steady. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look like someone trying to keep the peace in a house of whispers and slammed doors. She looked like someone who said enough and people listened. Claire stared at that photo for a long time. Something inside her clicked into place. She folded the page and slipped it into her notebook. That night, while Cassandra showed off her college acceptance letter at dinner, complete with full scholarship to a private liberal arts school, Claire sat quietly and passed the salad. Gregory raised his glass. "To my golden girl," he said. Claire smiled politely, but inside, something burned. Later in her bedroom, she looked at the page again. The caption read, "Leadership requires stillness under fire." That stillness was something she had been practicing her whole life. The application process to the military academy was long and rigid. She knew she couldn't talk to her family about it, not yet. Instead, she asked her guidance counselor for help. Mrs. Franklin nodded and said, "You've got the grit." "But are you sure?" Claire said. "I'm sure. I want out, and I want purpose." When the acceptance letter came, Claire hid it in her calculus textbook. The official seal made her hands shake. She had done it. She had chosen a future that was her own. That weekend, she told her family at dinner. The room went cold. Gregory stared at her like she'd spoken a different language. Cassandra choked on her wine. Linda dropped her fork. Claire kept her voice steady. "I've been accepted. I leave in June." Gregory slammed his glass down. "That's not a real future. You think you'll survive boot camp? You're not built for it. You're soft, Claire." "Always have been," Cassandra added. "You're going to embarrass yourself. That uniform doesn't fix your personality." Claire's eyes stung, but she didn't blink. "I didn't ask for permission. I just wanted to tell you." Linda opened her mouth like she might defend her, then closed it. Claire stood and left the table. In her room, she found her suitcase and began packing even though she had months left. She folded clothes she wouldn't wear again. She taped the military academy's mission statement to the wall. She ran laps before school. She did push-ups until her arms ached. She stopped trying to be liked. She trained herself to be prepared. On the morning she left, Gregory didn't say goodbye. Cassandra stayed in bed. Only Linda came to the curb, hands tucked into the sleeves of her cardigan. She handed Claire a folded envelope. "I wrote this last night," she said. "Read it when you're ready." Claire nodded. She didn't hug her mother. That would have broken them both. On the bus, she opened the letter. It was short, just one page. It read, "Claire, I stayed in this house so you and your sister could have stability, even if it came at a cost. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the cost was too high. If you find a way to be free, stay free. Don't shrink. Don't settle. Come back stronger. For yourself. For all of us who couldn't. Love, Mom." Claire folded the letter back into its envelope and tucked it inside her boot. At the academy, she was the quiet one. But she never faltered. When others cried at night, she kept her breath even. When someone screamed in her face, she looked straight ahead. When her drill sergeant asked, "Why are you here, Bennett?" she said, "To become someone who can't be ignored." And she meant it. She passed the obstacle courses. She learned how to handle a weapon. She memorized protocol rank structure field operations. She learned how to be calm under fire. But she also learned something more important, how to hold herself up when no one else would. She missed her mother, but she didn't call. She knew Linda couldn't speak freely. Letters came brief and safe. Cassandra never wrote. Gregory never acknowledged she had left. On graduation day, Claire stood among the other cadets, her shoulders square, her eyes forward. She didn't expect anyone to be there. But after the ceremony, as she walked across the courtyard, she saw her mother near the gate, clutching her purse like a shield. Linda's hair had more gray. Her shoes looked worn, but she was there. Claire walked to her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Linda placed a hand on Claire's cheek and whispered, "You did it. You found your voice." Claire nodded. "And I'm going to use it." Linda blinked, proud and scared all at once. Claire hugged her then, not like a daughter seeking comfort, but like a woman who had returned from war carrying more than medals. She was carrying truth, and she wasn't done yet. When Claire returned home 6 years later, the air around the house still felt heavy. The siding had been repainted, the porch light replaced, but the energy inside remained the same. The walls seemed to remember. Cassandra greeted her at the door with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Wow," she said, "Army girl's back." Claire didn't respond. Her boots left faint dust prints on the polished tile floor. The living room smelled of cinnamon air freshener, as if trying too hard to seem warm. Gregory sat in his recliner, the television blaring news at full volume. He didn't stand up. "So they let you out, huh?" Claire said nothing. Linda peeked from the kitchen, her face lighting up in a way that was almost involuntary, but she didn't rush over. She glanced toward Gregory and offered only a quiet welcome home, sweetheart. Claire sat stiffly through dinner, chewing dry meatloaf and fielding questions that weren't really questions. Cassandra asked, "So what exactly do you do? Are you like fighting on the front lines, or are you just pushing papers in an office with AC?" Gregory snorted. They probably kept her in a closet. Couldn't trust her with anything real. Claire looked at her plate. The metal in her bag felt heavier than ever. After dessert, Cassandra scrolled through her phone while saying to Linda, "You should see how many followers my last campaign got. My face is on the side of a bus downtown. Real people saw it." Claire didn't flinch. Later that week, Linda invited everyone over for her birthday. Claire helped bake the cake, a quiet gesture of love. When the day came, Claire arrived at 6 p.m., holding flowers. The house was filled with people. Laughter, clinking glasses, familiar faces from the neighborhood. But her name wasn't on the guest list. Cassandra walked by in a cocktail dress, glanced at Claire's bouquet, and said, "Oh, you came! That's sweet! We thought you'd be on base or something." Claire looked around. Her mother was nowhere to be seen. Gregory was showing off family photos to a group of neighbors, skipping Claire's military graduation and highlighting Cassandra's college gala instead. Claire made her way to the kitchen. Linda was there, frosting a second cake, eyes puffy. She froze when she saw her. Claire whispered, "You didn't invite me." Linda turned toward the oven. "I was going to," she said, but Cassandra thought it might create tension. Claire's heart dropped. "You let her erase me." Linda didn't answer. Claire left the flowers on the table and walked out the back door into the cold. A few days later, Claire overheard Cassandra on the phone. She was on the patio, voice sharp and smug. "I mean, Claire acts like she's this hero, but we all know she just wanted attention. You know how she is. Drama queen since middle school, probably using PTSD as an excuse to skip real life." Claire stood behind the curtain, every word branding itself into her. She didn't confront her. Not yet. She had learned in the military that precision mattered. Strategy mattered. Emotional reactions got people killed. Back in her childhood bedroom, now stale with old perfume and plastic trophies, Claire unpacked. She looked at the envelope with her medal, ran her fingers over the ribbon. There was no pride in holding it here. Not in this house. It felt like laying a trophy at the feet of people who mocked the effort it took to survive. That night at dinner, Cassandra brought up politics. Claire offered one calm opinion and Gregory cut her off. "Don't speak unless you've done something that matters." Cassandra laughed. "You mean unless she's getting shot at?" Claire's fork paused midair. "I have done something that matters, more than you'll ever understand." Gregory leaned back. "You think that uniform gives you character. You're still the same girl who cried over broken shoelaces." Claire stood up slowly. "And you're still the man who caused those tears." Linda gasped. Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Don't start, Claire." Claire looked at her mother. "When do you say something? When is enough enough?" Linda's eyes dropped to her lap. "That's what I thought," Claire whispered. She turned and left the table. Alone in her car that night, Claire stared at the dashboard, the radio playing low static. She thought of her barracks, her fellow soldiers, people who listened when she spoke, who saluted her, who saw her. Back here, she was a uniform draped over someone they'd already decided didn't matter. But that was going to change. Claire realized the only way to make them see was to bring the war they tried to hide into the open. Not with violence, with truth, with documentation, with strategy. They wanted her to stay invisible, but Claire Bennett had been trained for visibility, and this time the battlefield was personal. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam doors or throw accusations. She planned. She watched. She listened. Cassandra thought she was above suspicion, floating through life on praise and curated perfection. Gregory believed fear would keep Claire silent forever. But they underestimated the woman who had spent years learning how to endure pressure without cracking. Claire began quietly organizing files on her laptop, labeling recordings, syncing cloud backups. She started carrying a pocket-sized recorder in her jacket activated with one tap. The house was always full of material. Gregory's muttered insults, Cassandra's passive-aggressive comments, and even Linda's quiet acknowledgments of things gone wrong. It didn't take long to build a folder full of evidence. One night, Claire caught Cassandra forging Linda's signature on a check. Claire didn't interrupt. She simply pressed record. Cassandra hummed while signing, then whispered, "You don't need it, Mom. You've got me." Claire stored the audio with a timestamp. Another evening, she overheard Gregory on the phone with someone from his old precinct, bragging about how he kept his girls in line. Sometimes they need a firm hand, you know how women get. Laughed. Claire clicked save. Slowly, methodically, she built a case not for court yet, but for clarity, for truth, for leverage. At the same time, she began researching elder financial abuse laws, power of attorney regulations, emotional abuse statutes. She scheduled a consultation with a military legal officer off base, brought a summary of the situation, redacted recordings, and hospital bills from the past. The officer looked through the file and said, "You've already done half the work." Claire nodded. "I just need to know my next step." He advised her to document everything for another 2 weeks and to gather statements from third parties and neighbors, family, friends, anyone who might have witnessed Gregory's temper or Cassandra's manipulation. Claire began visiting old neighbors. Some were hesitant, some were tired, but a few remembered. Mrs. Arnett across the street said, "I always wondered why your mom wore sunglasses inside." Mr. Wallace, the mailman, recalled hearing shouting through the garage door on winter mornings. Claire asked him if he would put that in writing. He said yes. Meanwhile, she gently encouraged her mother to talk. They sat together over tea, and Claire asked about the family finances. Linda hesitated, then opened a drawer filled with unopened bank statements, folded donation requests, medical bills, and thank you notes for Cassandra's fundraising campaigns. Claire sifted through them, finding transactions that didn't match. Jewelry purchases charged to Linda's account. Hotel bills while Cassandra was supposedly out of town for work. Claire laid them out. "Mom, do you remember these?" Linda stared at the dates, lips parting slightly. "That's not mine." Claire nodded. "I know." She didn't press further. Instead, she took copies and left the originals. Later that week, Cassandra cornered her in the hallway. "You've been nosy lately," she said. "You always were." Claire replied calmly, "Just cleaning up the messes you leave behind." Cassandra smirked. "You really think you matter now because you wear that uniform? You're still the weird little sister who nobody noticed." Claire smiled faintly. "That's what you think." At night, Claire reviewed everything. Labeled folders, marked highlights. She created a print packet and sealed it in an envelope labeled emergency use. She also emailed it to a secure inbox. Every precaution. Every contingency. The final catalyst came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Claire returned from a grocery run and heard her parents arguing. That was rare. Gregory's voice thundered. "You think she's better than us just because she's in the army? You think she knows everything." Linda's voice shook but didn't break. "She's trying to help," Gregory roared. "She's trying to take control. Like hell, I'll let her." Claire stood outside the door and closed her eyes. Enough. That night, she made her decision. The base was hosting a veterans recognition ceremony in 3 weeks. Claire had been nominated to receive a second commendation for a high-level security operation she'd led abroad. She hadn't planned on inviting anyone, but now she printed invitations. She sent one to Gregory, one to Cassandra, one to Linda. Then she made a separate envelope. Inside, she placed the full documentation photos, statements, timelines, and a short letter, to be read by command in case of public incident. Claire didn't want chaos. She wanted precision. She wanted exposure that couldn't be undone. The last page of the packet read, "This is not revenge. This is acknowledgement. If you ask why now, the answer is simple: because silence protected them for too long. I will not wear silence anymore. I wear truth." Claire set the envelope aside. She looked at herself in the mirror. Uniform pressed, eyes forward, spine straight. Let them come. She was ready. The Veterans Recognition Ceremony was held beneath a wide white canopy pitched on the west lawn of the base. Rows of folding chairs lined the field flags from every military branch flanking the stage, each movement of fabric crisp against the soft morning breeze. Officers, families, and press personnel murmured politely as they filled their seats, the air charged with reverence. Claire stood behind the stage curtain uniform, immaculate fingers tight around the brim of her cap. Her second commendation would be awarded for her role in defusing a security breach overseas, but no one here knew the other battle she'd been preparing to expose. As scheduled, she had arranged for her family to be seated in the third row. Gregory arrived in a too-tight suit tie, askew, posture aggressive. Cassandra walked beside him, head held high and a fitted white blazer, phone in hand, recording everything. Linda came a few steps behind, arms folded across her stomach like a barrier. Claire peeked out once, caught her mother's eyes, and held them just long enough for Linda to nod. The ceremony began with speeches. Commanders spoke of sacrifice, unity, honor. A slideshow of photos from deployments played on a screen behind them. Then Claire's name was called. She stepped onto the stage boots, clicking cleanly on the platform. Applause rose around her, but she kept her face composed, professional. The colonel shook her hand, pinned the new medal beside the first. She saluted. He stepped aside. Claire faced the microphone. She had prepared a formal statement, one approved by the event organizers. But what came out of her mouth wasn't that speech. It began the same way. "Thank you. I'm honored." But then her voice shifted, stronger, clearer. "Today, I'm not only standing as a soldier, I'm standing as a daughter, a survivor, and for the first time, I'm going to speak the truth." There was a beat of silence. Cameras turned. The colonel frowned slightly. Claire continued, "We celebrate honor in service, but sometimes the battles we survive are not the ones on foreign soil. Sometimes they happen in our own homes. Sometimes they happen in silence behind perfect-looking doors." Her eyes moved toward the third row. Gregory crossed his arms. Cassandra smirked. Linda stared at her lap. Claire spoke calmly. "For years, I was told I was weak, told I was second, told I was invisible. I believed it until I put on this uniform. Not because the uniform made me strong, but because I realized I always had been." She reached into her jacket, pulled out a folder. "What I'm holding here is a record of what strength in silence looks like. Statements from neighbors, financial records, audio transcripts, evidence of psychological manipulation and verbal abuse that stretched over 2 decades. She handed the folder to a nearby officer. He looked stunned, but took it. "These documents have already been submitted to base legal authorities, and I'm not sharing this for revenge. I'm sharing it because truth should not require permission." Claire paused. She looked down at the third row. Gregory's face was crimson. Cassandra rolled her eyes, whispering something sharp to the woman beside her. Linda slowly lifted her head. Claire went on. "You cannot honor a soldier without honoring what they've survived. And the most dangerous battle I ever faced was the one where no one raised a weapon. Only words, only silence, only control." She closed her statement. "I speak today not just for myself, but for anyone who's been told to shrink, to stay quiet, to endure. I say this, your endurance is not weakness. It's armor." The applause didn't come immediately. People were still absorbing what they'd heard. Then it came slow, uncertain, then stronger. Officers clapped. A few stood. Claire kept her expression neutral. On the field, Gregory stood abruptly. "What the hell is this?" he barked. Everyone turned. "You think airing your dirty laundry here makes you brave? You think this changes anything?" Cassandra grabbed his arm. "Dad, sit down. You're embarrassing us." But he shoved her hand away. "Don't you tell me what to do. This is a damn stunt." Claire didn't move. She watched. Gregory stepped into the aisle, pointing. "You think you're better than us because you have a badge and a medal? You're nothing. You always were. You're just a girl in a costume." Claire spoke from the stage, calm and even. "This is not a costume. It's a reflection of earned truth. And I don't answer to you anymore." He shouted again, but security had already begun moving. An officer approached him quietly, asking him to return to his seat or leave. Cassandra stood tugging Gregory's sleeve. He jerked away. Linda stood too, placing herself between them. "Enough," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, but it was audible. "Just stop." The field was still. Claire watched them, the family who had tried to keep her small beings seen at last for what they were. Not through her rage, but through their own unraveling. And that was more powerful than anything she could have yelled. The camera crews caught every second. But Claire wasn't performing. She was reclaiming space that had always been hers, and she was far from finished. The ceremony was over, but the aftermath rippled through the base like a quiet storm. News of Claire's speech spread faster than she expected. Within hours, clips of her standing tall in uniform while her father raged from the audience began circulating on social media. A few local outlets picked up the story. Female officer speaks out about hidden abuse during military commendation. Some called her brave. Some questioned her timing. But Claire wasn't interested in opinions. She had delivered her truth. Now it was time to finish what she started. That same evening, she received a message from Base Legal Services requesting an official meeting. She brought her files. Not just duplicates, she brought photographs, financial breakdowns, a timeline of hospital visits linked to accidents that matched outbursts she remembered vividly. She played them audio, her father mocking her mother, Cassandra talking about how easy it was to sign checks for someone too tired to fight back. The officer across the desk didn't blink. He asked, "Why didn't your mother press charges?" Claire replied, "Because she was surviving in a war zone without a name." The officer nodded. "We'll move forward." 2 days later, Claire was called back in. They had opened a formal investigation. They would be contacting Linda, speaking to witnesses assessing financial exploitation and emotional harm under elder abuse provisions. Gregory wouldn't see it coming. Cassandra would panic. Claire didn't smile. She just breathed easier. At home, Gregory stormed through the living room the night after the ceremony, slamming drawers and pacing. He shouted, "She's turned this place into a circus. I raised her. I protected this family. Now she wants to ruin us." Cassandra hissed back, "This is your fault. You never knew how to keep your mouth shut." Claire stood at the doorway. Her presence froze the room. She looked directly at her father. "You can keep talking, but it won't undo what's been submitted." He stepped forward, finger raised. "You think you've won?" Claire didn't move. "I haven't even started." The next day, she filed a restraining order request. When legal teams reviewed the material she had provided, they fast-tracked protective measures for Linda. A notice was delivered to the house. Gregory wasn't allowed near her, nor was he permitted to access shared financial accounts until the investigation concluded. Cassandra's fury came not with words, but with action. She tried to move money. Claire got an alert. She forwarded it. The account was frozen within hours. Cassandra cornered Claire outside the kitchen. "I hope you're happy." "Mom's terrified." Claire looked at her eyes cold. "No, she's free. She's just not used to it yet." Cassandra's voice cracked. "You don't understand what you've done." "This family," Claire interrupted, "this family was built on silence. I tore that foundation apart." Cassandra laughed bitterly. "You're so dramatic. Always needed a stage." Claire leaned in. "I didn't need a stage. I needed witnesses." The next week brought more shifts. Linda was moved into a temporary safe housing unit provided by a local support program for elder abuse survivors. She wasn't sure at first. Claire drove her there herself. On the ride, Linda stared out the window. "Am I weak for leaving now?" Claire answered without hesitation. "No, you're strong for surviving, and stronger for choosing different." Linda blinked, hard tears collecting at the corner of her eyes. "I should have done it sooner." Claire reached for her hand. "We weren't ready sooner." That afternoon, Claire got a call from the same reporter who had picked up the ceremony clip. She wanted to do a full feature. Claire hesitated, then agreed under one condition: her mother's name would be protected. The article went live under the title, "The Other Battlefield Lieutenant Claire Bennett Speaks Out on Family Abuse and Silent Strength." It quoted her speech. It described the moment her father erupted in public. But more importantly, it gave space to the idea that trauma wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was folded laundry, quiet tears, years of being told to be small. Emails flooded in other service members, civilian women, even veterans, thanking her for her bravery, for naming something they had endured alone. Claire read them at night. She replied when she could. But the most important moment came a week later. Claire came home to find Gregory gone. His belongings were packed. A note from a sheriff's office sat on the kitchen counter. He had been served. He was leaving until the investigation concluded. Cassandra was upstairs, her voice low and frantic on the phone. Claire didn't care what she was planning. The power she once held was crumbling. Claire walked into the quiet living room. The television was off. The house, once a cage, felt still. She sank into the armchair her father used to occupy and sat there breathing, remembering. Every insult, every dismissal, every time she had swallowed her voice. Not anymore. Later that evening, Linda called from the safe unit. Her voice was calm. "They have flowers here. Real ones. I can smell them when I wake up." Claire smiled. "You deserve that." Linda exhaled. "Claire, I didn't know how strong you were." Claire closed her eyes. "I learned it from you. Even when you were silent, I saw it. I carried it. Now I'm just saying it out loud. And people are listening." For the first time, they both sat in places where no one could touch them, where fear didn't decorate the walls, and truth didn't have to be hidden behind closed doors. The reversal wasn't loud. It was steady, and it was just the beginning. In the weeks following the ceremony, consequences unfurled with a quiet, unrelenting rhythm. It began with a formal inquiry into Gregory's pension and prior misconduct. Claire had supplied old audio tapes of him bragging about how he disciplined his family without leaving visible marks. Paired with neighbor testimonies and records of psychological intimidation, the evidence painted a picture impossible to ignore. Gregory, once smug in his authority, was asked to surrender his firearms and step away from any contact with former precinct colleagues pending review. For the first time, his network stopped returning his calls. He wasn't the respected retired officer anymore, he was a liability. At home, Cassandra's pristine image began to crack. Word spread that her influencer career had been built on stolen funds. Linda, with Claire's help, filed an official financial complaint citing forged signatures and unauthorized transactions. Once the banks got involved, Cassandra's accounts were frozen for auditing. Her brand sponsors quietly backed away. Her name disappeared from the side of the bus downtown. She tried to spin a victim narrative online, but screenshots surfaced comments mocking her sister's trauma messages, bragging about manipulating their mother. The internet turned. Her silence had once protected her. Now her silence was evidence. Linda, guided by Claire's legal contacts, filed for emancipation from Gregory's financial guardianship. Though they were still married on paper, she severed ties through power of attorney and financial control. The courts granted her autonomy based on Claire's extensive documentation. It was the first time Linda had control over her own name, her own bank account, her own choices. She cried in the car after the ruling, clutching the papers like a passport to another life. Claire just squeezed her hand. At the base, Claire was quietly pulled aside by her commanding officer. He wasn't angry. He was curious. "That took guts," he said. "Not many people would have done it that way." Claire replied simply, "I didn't do it for applause. I did it because someone had to." He nodded. "Just know there are eyes on you now. The good kind." Claire didn't chase attention, but she understood its power. She agreed to speak at a closed-session support group for female service members dealing with family trauma. One by one, women in uniform approached her afterward, some shaking, some tearful, saying, "I thought I was the only one." That alone made every ounce of risk worth it. Gregory was formally charged with psychological abuse and coercive control. Though difficult to prosecute historically, the volume and consistency of Claire's evidence moved the case forward. His pension was partially withheld. Public opinion in the community shifted. Former colleagues distanced themselves. The man who had once commanded rooms with his badge now found doors closed. Cassandra was subpoenaed for financial testimony. She arrived in court without makeup, without cameras. The courtroom was silent as she listened to her own recordings played aloud. Her voice, sarcastic and cruel, no longer sounded powerful. It sounded petty. Linda sat beside Claire, hands steady in her lap. She didn't speak when the judge reprimanded Cassandra. She didn't flinch when fines were issued. She simply nodded when the gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, Cassandra tried to speak to the press. Claire walked past her without turning. A reporter called out, "Lieutenant Bennett, what would you say to families suffering in silence?" Claire stopped. She looked directly at the camera. "I'd say silence protects the wrong people. I'd say you are allowed to speak even if your voice shakes." Then she walked away. Her words trended again, but Claire didn't check the numbers. She spent her time helping Linda find a small condo in a quiet neighborhood, modest, safe hers. They painted the walls together. They built shelves. They planted a row of sunflowers in the tiny front yard. It wasn't grand. It was grounded. Meanwhile, Claire's superiors began talking about her in different terms. She was no longer just a decorated officer. She was a leader. She was asked to contribute to a training program on emotional resilience and post-trauma recovery. She accepted. It was work that mattered, work that healed, and Claire for the first time felt her pain becoming purpose. The toxic system that had tried to make her small was dismantled piece by piece, not with rage but with evidence, strategy, and truth. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Gregory never apologized. Cassandra never admitted guilt. But they no longer held power. The community saw them now. And more importantly, Claire no longer needed their validation to stand tall. One evening, Claire returned from base to find Linda sitting outside reading a book, legs tucked beneath her. There was tea on the porch table, music humming low from a small speaker. Linda looked up and smiled. "Peace suits you," Claire said. Linda replied, "You gave me space to find it." Claire sat beside her. The air was still. The sun dipped behind the roofline. For the first time in decades, neither of them flinched at shadows. And somewhere inside, Claire knew this was the consequence they never expected. That she would rise. That Linda would heal. That truth, once released, would keep echoing. Not just in courtrooms, but in homes like theirs, in lives waiting for someone to go first. Claire stood at the edge of the ceremony field again, months after the chaos, but this time there was no audience, no cameras, no spotlight, just silence. The same field where she had once knelt in uniform, broken by her sister's scream. The grass had grown thicker, the wind gentler. She held her 2 medals in her left hand, fingers brushing over the engraved dates. One for service abroad, one for the battle at home. They weighed the same, yet the second one meant more. It was earned not just through courage, but through truth. That morning, she had received a package from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Inside was a letter of recognition not for her military conduct, but for her advocacy. The letter read, "Your story has empowered survivors in uniform and out. Your service to your country now extends beyond borders." Claire smiled faintly. She knew what it had cost to reach this point: pain, exposure, betrayal, but also clarity, agency, and a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She sat on a bench nearby, letting the sun warm her skin, and thought about how far she'd come. The girl who once cried behind closed doors was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced her past without flinching. Her phone buzzed. It was Linda. "Just planted the last of the sunflowers. They're blooming faster than I expected." Claire texted back, "So are we." A few moments later, she opened the Notes app and began typing. Not a journal entry, not a report, a letter, not to Gregory, not to Cassandra, but to the next girl. The one still sitting in her childhood bedroom wondering if she's imagining the weight of silence. The one still being told she's too dramatic, too soft, too much. Claire wrote, "You are not imagining it. And you are not too much. The world needs your voice, even if it shakes. They taught you to shrink because your power terrified them. Let that be your proof. Keep your records, trust your instincts, and when the time comes, speak. Even if your voice trembles, even if you fall to your knees, you will rise." The letter was short, sharp, enough. She saved it as for her and closed the app. Later, she would send it to a support network to be distributed anonymously. For now, it stayed on her phone, a quiet reminder of the work that still mattered. As she walked back to her car, she saw a small girl near the edge of the field, staring up at the flags. The girl's mother stood behind her, snapping a photo. The child turned and saw Claire in uniform. Her eyes lit up. She waved. Claire waved back her medals, glinting slightly in the sun. The mother smiled. "Thank you for your service." Claire nodded. "Thank you for being here." As she drove home, she passed the street where Cassandra used to film her lifestyle videos. It was quiet now. The branded banners were gone. The mailbox was overstuffed. The silence there felt different, like absence not healing. And Gregory, he had left town. No forwarding address. No grand apology. Just disappearance. He had become exactly what he feared irrelevant. And Linda. She had joined a book club, started painting again, got her hair cut short for the first time in 30 years. Claire visited every weekend. They laughed now, not cautiously, but freely. Claire had filed no lawsuits beyond the initial charges. She didn't need revenge. Consequences had done their work. Truth had done its part. Closure wasn't loud, it was subtle. It looked like breathing without flinching, sleeping without fear, standing in front of a mirror and seeing herself not someone broken, but someone rebuilt. One night, months later, Claire was invited to speak at a conference on family systems and trauma. She stepped onto the stage in a simple black dress, no uniform this time, but her voice was even stronger. She told her story not to relive pain, but to release it. When she finished, the room stood, not because she had demanded it, but because truth demands space. In the back row, a woman wept silently. In the front, a teenage boy nodded fists clenched with understanding. And Claire realized this was her legacy, not the medals, not the headlines, but the ripple. The reminder that silence can be broken, that fear can be named, that love, real love, does not hurt or control or belittle, it builds. After the event, a man approached her quietly. "My sister's going through something similar. Can I show her your speech?" Claire nodded. "Of course. Tell her she's not alone, that she's never been." Later that evening, she stood on her mother's porch, wineglass in hand, watching the sunset behind the sunflowers. Linda came out and joined her. For once, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was not tense. It was peaceful, and that, Claire thought, was everything. Closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant holding pain without letting it define you. It meant walking through the same door, not as a prisoner, but as the architect. Claire looked up at the darkening sky and whispered, "I made it." Then she whispered again, louder this time, for every girl still finding her way. "You will too." And the wind, soft and steady, carried her words farther than she could ever walk.